You play Cleric in Dungeons and Dragons? Do you like phoenixes? Phoenixi? Phoenicians? The multiple form of the firebird that does the healing and all those things? Well, a good friend of mine released this for free on D&D Beyond, and I'm going to cover it. So if you want to see what's going on with the Phoenix Domain Cleric, stay tuned. I guess we'll just burn and reform from the ashes. I'll have a good bit. Anyway, what's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and my good friend Lauren, who you may know as Obo Lauren or Obo Crazy from the D&D Beyond team, recently put this out just a couple hours ago at this point on Twitter, that this is a free domain. It's a homebrew domain. You can go and download it if you want from D&D Beyond or add it into your D&D Beyond account. So if we go right here, you can see, here it is. So Phoenix Domain, and it says, you know, it's got a little bit of flavor text, but also special thanks to Adam Walden, Dustin Fletcher, Eugenio Vargas, and James Hake. So they must have all been involved in some degree. But let's go ahead and take a look into what we get for this. So let's see. We are going to get the following spells: Burning Hands and Cure Wounds at 1st level, Flaming Sphere, Gentle Repose at 3rd level, Fireball, Revivify at 5th level, Wall of Fire, Death Ward at 7th level, and Flame Strike and Raise Dead at 9th level. So if I look at these, I mean, there's definitely some really good ones you're going to get for free that you would normally have as a cleric. Obviously, it seems like you're going to be balancing between fire damage and healing. So Cure Wounds is a cleric spell. It's usually one you may have prepared. And that's a freebie. So is Revivify and Raise Dead. So you've got some really good resurrection, low-level resurrection magics already prepared. Death War is also a really good one. And then obviously you're going to get access to fire spells you would normally have, like Burning Hands, Flaming Sphere, Fireball, and Wall of Fire. I believe Flame Strike is a cleric spell. So it seems, I see... So we'll have to see, because I only did a very cursory read through, so we'll have to see as we continue down how this separates itself from the light domain cleric. I recognize some differences already, right? Like light domain has Scorching Ray, for example, but they both have Fireball. So let's see. At 1st level, when you choose this domain at 1st level, you gain the Produce Flame cantrip. For this... For you, this cantrip counts as a cleric cantrip. Okay, so one, that gives clerics one of my biggest disappointments with clerics is the lack of an attacking cantrip. I've stated this many times in the past. I like attacking cantrips over saving throw cantrips because I feel like I failed if I miss with an attack roll cantrip. Like that, the onus is on me for who failed. Whereas if it's a DC, a saving throw based cantrip, I like it's out of my control, or it's on the DM to roll, and like I feel like I failed by my own dice, whereas like I have no idea what's going on if the DM rolls for a saving throw, and then it just, to me, it feels even worse if I use a saving throw cantrip and the DM succeeds, because like then I had no control over what happened, really. Whereas if I attack, I can see on my die roll I passed or failed, or I could even crit. Also at 1st level, the destruction of your foes brings warmth to your allies. Whenever you cast a spell of 1st level or higher that does fire damage, one creature of your choice that you can see regains hit points equal to a d6 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier. You regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Okay, so that's interesting. I do like that it's one, competently built, and that it has multiple options at 1st level as a cleric, which is something that we've seen even PHB cleric subclasses don't have. So I like this. I like to Produce Flame. As far as the healing, so obviously it will be broken, or no, it wouldn't be broken because it's limited. I might still allow you to use your cantrips to heal, because I mean, it's wisdom modifier times per long rest you can do this. So really, in most scenarios, the most you're going to be able to do this is 5 times. And realistically, you don't have a ton of fire damage spells as a cleric. You're limited pretty much to the spells you get from this class. There may be a few other ones outside of just these 5, but I think for the most part, that's going to be it. So I'd be fine that you could use your cantrip to produce flame cantrip. I'd be okay with that. Whenever I think I might make that whenever you cast a spell that deals fire damage, a creature of your choice that you can see. See, the only difference here is this doesn't have a range. It does not have a range limitation. It's just that you can see. I feel like I'd probably say within 60 feet. Whenever you cast a spell, this is how I would do it. Whenever you cast a spell that does fire damage, one creature of your choice within 60 feet regains hit points equal to a d6 plus your spellcasting modifier. Wisdom modifier times per long rest. Alternatively, keep it with a first level spell or higher and make it be a d6 plus the spell's level plus your spellcasting ability modifier. And I like that maybe even better, because then if I'm going to spend a 5th level spell slot to deal fire damage, they're going to get a d6 plus the spell's level plus my spellcasting ability modifier. And that I think I like a little bit better. That kind of reminds me a little bit of how some of the life domain cleric abilities work. All right. So at 2nd level, we're going to get Channel Divinity. As an action, you present your holy symbol and a sphere of fiery light emanates from you. The sphere is centered on you, has a 30-foot radius, and is filled with bright light, and moves with you and lasts for 1 minute or until you're incapacitated or die. Whenever a creature, including you, ends its turn in the sphere, you grant a creature one of these benefits. No action required. The fire bolsters their vitality, giving them a d8 temporary hit points. The fire protects them, granting fire resistance or resistance to fire damage until the end of your next turn. So whenever a creature ends its turn in the sphere. Okay. All right, so I like this. This is when I first read it, I thought it was going to be very similar to the light domain kind of thing, or like through other abilities, but I like that. So they end their turn in your kind of aura that you have, which lasts for a minute, and they either get temporary hit points or they get fire damage or fire resistance. And what's nice is you don't have to concentrate on this. So it's an action to set this thing up, but then it emanates from you for a minute or until you're incapacitated or died. But, this makes it worth, in my opinion, sacrificing an action to provide this aura. One, it's going to give you light. So that could be, a game changer for you. And then now you've got this thing up, so you can still use a bonus action. You can still do whatever else on your turn when you use this initial action. But now, for a minute, you're basically pumping out temporary hit points or fire resistance. I might just make it just clear it up that it says you grant the creature one of these benefits. I might just clarify that it's of their choice. Because I don't personally, in my opinion, I wouldn't want to be making the choice whether they get fire resistance or temporary hit points. Let them make that choice. It is also whenever a creature ends its turn. So this also works for enemies. Oh, it says protect your allies from a curtain of flames, but it says right here, whenever a creature, including you, ends its turn there, you can grant that creature one of these benefits. So I think in my mind that reads a little funky, that when you first read this, whenever a creature, including you, ends its turn there, you can grant them this. So I would just change it to whenever a creature of your choice ends its turn in this sphere, you can grant them one of the following benefits. Their choice, no action required. Basically just clean up the wording so it's pretty apparent how it works. And again, remember, you will eventually have a maximum of 3 channel divinities, and those come back on a short rest. So that's going to be pretty much consistent access to fire damage, or fire resistance, or temporary hit points. At 6, you get Rise from the Ashes. When you cast a cleric spell that will return a creature from the dead, you can choose to cast the spell without needing any material components, instead using the energy of your own fire to fuel the spell. When you cast this spell in this way, the creature returns to life with all of their hit points and does not suffer any penalties from coming back from the dead. However, the effort taxes you greatly. If you cast Revivify, you take a -2 penalty to attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks, or a -4 penalty for Raise Dead Resurrection and True Resurrection. Every time you finish a long rest, the penalty is reduced by 1. I think that I actually really like that, right? So probably the biggest, 5th edition, it's very hard to die in general with the access to resurrection magics and the way they work. The biggest detractor from that is just finding diamonds to allow you to do the resurrection spells. So typically, if you do Raise Dead, I think, or regular resurrection, that person comes back with a -4 penalty to attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks, and it goes down by 1 for each day that they, each time they take a long rest, it goes down by 1. Revivify doesn't typically do that, but it does still cost diamonds. So I like the idea of me, the Phoenix, I'm giving up my Phoenix fire, my life force, to bring you back without needing material components, and I'm taking that burden of the resurrection sickness on myself. And I actually really like that. I think that's very clean. I think it works very well. At 8, you get potent cantrips, so wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with any cleric cantrip, which is even better because you're going to be dealing, you have your attack roll cantrip in Produce Flame that you get at the start, so now you can be throwing that D6, right, for Produce Flame. D8s for Produce Flame. I thought it was a D6. Well, that's even better. D8s from Produce Flame, adding your wisdom modifier to that damage, which is nice. And again, also has the potential to crit. And then lastly, Avatar of Destruction. The power of the Phoenix can save you from death while punishing those who would harm you. If you drop to 0 hit points or are killed outright, your body and all of your equipment is immediately reduced to ash. At the end of your next turn, and you and your equipment are resurrected in an explosion of fire with half your hit points restored, and each creature of your choice within 30 feet of you takes fire damage equal to 2d10 plus your cleric level. Once you use this, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. So I like this concept. What I'm going to do now is we're going to go up here and we're going to look at the Warlock ability that looks very similar, the Celestial Warlock ability, because that's a pretty good template to see. So they get Searing Vengeance at 14th level. When you make a death... Oh, that was when you make a death saving throw at the start of your turn. You can instead spring back to your feet with a burst of radiant energy. When you regain hit points equal to half your hit point maximum and can choose to stand up if you choose. Each creature of your choice within 30 feet takes radiant damage equal to 2d8 plus your charisma modifier and is blinded until the end of your current turn. Once per long rest, versus this one, which is when you drop to 0 hit points or are killed outright, you reduce to ash. At the end of your next turn, you and your equipment are resurrected in an explosion of fire. Half your hit, so it's very similar in a lot of ways, right? That's why I wanted to take a look at that. So the other one is whenever you make a death saving throw, you can choose to just have this happen. This is when you are dropped to 0 or killed outright. That's tricky because you're already going to be a 17th level character, and it almost in some cases benefits you to die, which is kind of funky. And then it takes, you're going to basically lose a whole turn while this is happening, whereas the Warlock ability happens immediately. When you make the death saving throw at the start of your turn, you could just choose to do this. The Warlock ability is a 30-foot radius explosion, 2d8 plus your charisma modifier, and they're blinded, no saving throw until the end of your current turn. This is significantly more damage, 2d10 plus your cleric level, so at this point where it's 2d10 plus 17 fire damage. It is also fire damage though, so I like where it's at. I like the concept of you go down and then you come back in a burst of flames. It's very Phoenix themed. I do think I might add something else. This is your capstone, right? This is you made 17 level investment into cleric for this, and this is a once per long rest ability. I just can compare that to something like a forge domain cleric, or a tempest cleric is just unlimited flight, right? As long as you're outside. And this is a once per long rest ability. So I like that it does damage based on your cleric level. I like that you get to come back at half hit points. I mean, again, consider the fact that like well, you know, here, why don't we go look? We'll go back to the top and we'll look at some of the other cleric abilities real quick, for comparison's sake. So Arcana Domain is you get to pick all those different wizard spells and add them, a 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level wizard spell, and they become domain spells for you. They're always prepared and count as cleric spells for you. That's pretty nuts, right? Death Domain is garbage, so we're going to ignore that. Forge Domain is flat out immunity to fire damage and resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing while wearing heavy armor. Grave Domain is what? Whenever an enemy dies within 60 feet, one creature of your choice within 60 feet regains hit points equal to that enemy's hit dice. And that's usable once a turn whenever an enemy dies. The other ones we talked about, the Forge Domain, the Arcana Domain, those are evergreen. Those always happen. Knowledge Domain is a little complicated to read right now. 17th level Life Domain is max healing, max rolls on all healing that you do. Light Domain is this corona of light, this big light that people are going to have disadvantage on any saving throws that deal fire or radiant damage. Nature Domain is not great. Order Domain Cleric is, if you deal Divine Strike, you can curse them. The next time an ally hits them, they take extra psychic damage. Once a turn, that's usable. I told you Tempest Domain is just flight. Flight speed equal to your walking speed whenever you're not underground or indoors. Yeah, you get the point. So a lot of these things are very powerful. And for the most part, they're almost always an always-on ability. So I'm okay with it being once per long rest, but I think it needs to be better. It also is fire damage, right? And fire damage is very heavily resisted, and many creatures are immune to fire damage. And at 17th level, a lot of these things are going to be pretty beefy, so we may want to increase what this does. I like it as it stands. I like that it is, you go down, you burst into flame, you turn into ash, then you come back in reborn from the ashes. I'm not sure how I feel about the you go down, you die, because this could happen. So I guess it's not so bad. So you're killed. It's obviously not your turn when you're killed, for the most part. And then at the end of your next turn, this happens and you come back. I might make it at the start of your next turn, because that way you still have your whole action to do things. I like the damage. I like it being 2d10 plus your cleric level. I think that that's fine as far as damage goes. I might even say give yourself full hit points. Resurrected at full hit points. It's once a long rest, and currently it only happens when you die. So it's very situational, which is also sort of a problem in that it is so situational. But I guess you could work out interesting combos where your party members take you down so that you come back with full hit points and deal a bunch of damage to people. So I don't think I would tweak the damage. I think 2d10 plus your cleric level is fine. Maybe even 3d10 plus your cleric level. But I think you should also do something to boost your allies. I think that would be a cool factor. You come back in an explosion of fire. It deals a bunch of damage to your enemies. I like I said, I might just say you come back at full hit points. I mean, your spell slots and everything else are still expended. Obviously, this was a pretty harrowing fight if the fact that you are dead or were killed outright, drop to 0 hit points. Oh, I'm sorry, it is if you're dropped to 0 hit points. My mistake. I missed that. Sorry for that. Drop to 0 hit points. So the other one was when you're making death saving throws. This is when you're dropped to 0 hit points. So yeah, I might give you full hit points, because the Phoenix isn't reborn necessarily like super weak. They come back from the ashes and they're full strength. But if you want to keep it at half hit points, I might then let it also heal your allies too. I don't know if it's once per long rest. Is it too much to say, enemies within 30 feet of you take 2d10 plus your cleric level and damage, and allies within 30 feet of you regain 2d10 plus your cleric level and hit points? I don't know. That might be an interesting factor. I kind of like the thought of that, where you're damaging enemies and healing allies, or maybe it's temporary hit points. Allies gain 2d10 plus your cleric level and temporary hit points. I don't know, something like that. I think that would be a really cool concept, just to boost it up a little bit, considering almost every other cleric ability is an always on or like a once per turn kind of a thing. And yours is once per long rest, and it's contingent on you going to 0 hit points. So I don't know. That is pretty much it for the Phoenix Domain Cleric. Obviously, this is homebrew, right? So take that with a grain of salt, but I thought it was very well designed. I thought it needed a read through because, one, I know Lauren's a friend of mine, and I wanted to check out the homebrew that she made, and then also see how it stacks up in my analytical, critical mind of Dungeons and Dragons. So I like it. Like I said, I went through a couple of changes I might make to it, but for the most part, I mean, it's available on D&D Beyond in the homebrew section. You can go and add it into your homebrew collection and then incorporate it in your games if you see fit. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you like it as it is? Do you like my tweaks? Do you have other ideas for changes that you would add? I want to hear them in the comments. Thank you again to my patrons on Patreon for continuing to support the channel and me. And thank you again for everyone who subscribed recently. If you haven't, we just broke 40,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is nuts. And I would love to hit 50,000 by my birthday on July 12th, which is kind of nutty at this point. It's like 11 days, 12 days away to get almost 10,000 subscribers in 10 days, 10, 11, 12 days or so. That's a lot. Can we do it? I mean, maybe. That's really up to all of you. Also, to everyone who's been asking, since my birthday is on July 12th, there are links in the description to to an Amazon wish list and a PO box if you're so inclined. Since I've had people asking me about it, that's where you would find all that information. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.